Hey friends, today I've got some cool little jazzy licks to spice up your blues. Let's go. All right, cool. So today we're going to take a look at a couple of real simple licks that it's going to allow you to kind of jazz up your blues just a little bit and hopefully keep your listener kind of engaged in your lines. You know, before we get started though, make sure you like the video if you dig it. And also, if you're not already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. All right, so these licks are kind of based on this concept of moving from the 1 chord in a 12-bar blues to the 4 chord. This is one of my favorite little tricks, and it's pretty easy to do. There's a little bit of theory behind it, but we don't even need to get into that. It's actually pretty simple. Basically, what you want to do is create a little tension and resolution. So you want to play some notes that are going to create tension, and then of course you want to find those sweet notes when you get back into the next chord. Okay, so these licks are all just little short burst licks, little 1-bar licks, and they're just to kind of introduce your ear to the sound, and of course you can expand on them once you get them down. My thought process for putting these licks together is I was drawing from the A altered scale. Basically what that scale does is it creates tension on the A7 chord, and then of course you want to try to resolve the line directly into maybe a chord tone of the 4 chord, in this case D. You don't really need to think about that too much, but that was kind of my thought process for putting some of these licks together. All right, so the first lick, basically I'm thinking of when I transition from my A7 chord to the D chord, the 4 chord, in my 12-bar blues, I'm kind of just thinking about the chord that's up a half step from the D chord. And maybe you've done this before, not knowingly, you've just kind of put a little half step on your chord just to kind of jazz it up a little bit. And basically that's all I'm thinking about with this line. Of course you can go a little bit deeper into some music theory, but at the end of the day, that's all I'm really doing, is just seeing this basic bar chord and sliding it down into the resolution, which is the 4 chord D. The first lick here starts on this G note here. This is on the 8th fret of the B string, and then I go to the 6th fret of the high E string, and against the A chord that is a flat 9, so I'm thinking of that as a tension note. But really visually what I'm seeing here is this little triad here. Then I go back to the G note, into the A note here, back to the G note, and then to this, technically it would be an E sharp, believe it or not, because I'm thinking of it as a sharp 5 note against the A chord. But what this does is it encircles, or encloses as it's sometimes called, this major third of that D. So you get this enclosure. And that's kind of where the tension and the resolution comes in. And you can see I just got a D major triad, and I can carry on some ideas from that point on. So let's hear it in a track. All right, sounds pretty cool, and hopefully you can hear the tension and resolution, and it's actually pretty easy to find. This is our main kind of blues box here when we're playing in a particular key, so you can kind of really skew it against that and then hopefully see the resolution. All right, let's take a look at lick number 2. Now this one here is very similar, it's in the same position. Okay, so what I'm thinking about here is I'm playing an A, and to create the tension I'm going to use a B flat minor triad. Now see, when you play an E flat dominant 9 chord and you slide it down into the 4 chord, You have a B flat minor triad here and then an A minor triad here. So I'm just going to use this simple B flat minor triad, and I'm going to put some notes kind of from the altered scale on top just to give it a little bit of interest. So the lick is something like this. And you notice that I resolve on the 5th of that D. It's a chord tone, and of course it's always going to work. All right. Now, one thing to note, that I'm actually thinking of this as a pickup. Okay, so it's on the end of 4 of the measure prior, and I think that just kind of gives it a nice feel, and also kind of ends on an upbeat too. So that sometimes sounds cool, but you can technically phrase these any way you feel. I just want to kind of show you some of the shapes here. So basically what I'm doing is I'm starting on the A note, and then I'm just sliding up a half step to the B flat, and then there's that B flat minor triad. Now see, I'm sliding into the major third here of the A. That note is the flat 9, and that resolves back to A here, which is now the 5th of the D chord. So that's lick number 2. Let's hear it in a track. All right, that's pretty cool, and you can see it creates that tension and resolution. All right, let's take a look at lick number 3, and this one is in a different position. Of course, anytime you're kind of working on these kind of sounds, you want to have a couple of different positions to be able to pull them off, right? So that way you're not just kind of a slave to one spot here. You can move around and you've got this sound in other positions. So we're going to take a look at this position right here. Here's my A chord. This is kind of the B.B. King box. Okay, so the lick goes something like this. I'm going to start on the 11th fret of the B string, and I'm going to play the 9th fret of the high E string, and I'm just going to go back and forth between the two. And then I'm going to land on the G note on the 12th fret of the G string. And then my resolution is going to be the F sharp note on the 11th fret of the G string, and I might just kind of slide into that. And that puts me right on that D chord. That's the 3rd of that D chord, which is my 4 chord. So that should create a little bit of tension, and what you're really doing here, one way you could think about this is you're playing this diminished triad here, and you're just resolving it a half step down. Because that F sharp diminished triad is right inside of a D7 chord. So that's kind of my thought process here. It's just this, basically. I just created a little lick out of that sound. All right, let's hear it in a track. cool. And then last but not least, I kind of took the same approach. I said, let's find another position that we can do this in. And I'm gonna play it up here around this kind of A-shaped chord. We've got some great little blues spots here. That kind of sound there. And what we're gonna do is we got this A minor triad, and basically we're just moving that A minor triad up a half step to create a lick. And that will put us into our D chord, which is right here. So here's the lick. I'm going to start on the A note on the 14th fret of the G string and slide that up a half step and get into that B flat minor triad. And then here's my B flat minor triad. I got the 14th fret on the B string and 13th fret on the high E string. And then I'm going to go up to the 15th fret on the high E string. And then slide into the 14th fret on the high E string. And then I'm going to come down a little B minor triad. So B minor is like a D6 chord, right? So I can play some nice A minor blues or just A blues here. Right into my 4-chord D. Let's hear it in a track. Okay, pretty simple little licks, but it's really about the timing. So you really have to be able to internalize when this thing is coming, right? So basically, I'm thinking of it on the 4th measure of my 12-bar blues. So usually you're gonna have like 4 measures of your 1 chord, in this case A7, and then you're gonna, on the 5th measure, transition to your 4 chord, which in this case would be D7. I wanna make that transition, I wanna create that tension on the 4th measure. So really the trickiest part about this, aside from maybe trying to get your mind out of those patterns that you might normally play, is the timing of it, right? And remember, the whole thing is geared around tension and resolution. So try these simple licks out. And, you know, of course you can modify them, but use them to help get your timing down. And once you get your timing down, you can loosen up and maybe explore these shapes a little bit more. And just remember, kind of almost anything works as long as you can resolve it. So these will help you kind of get your phrasing and the feel going. And then from there, you can just take it from there. All right, cool. Thanks for hanging out. As always, like I said, please like, share, and subscribe. And also, if you get a chance, maybe check out my Patreon page. All your support is always appreciated. So I'll see you next time around.